Hello friends, my name is Rutvik. I am from Ahmedabad University, and in this video I am going to talk about fallacy of composition, which is a common one occurring in many situations and in many scenarios. In this I will brief you about what fallacy of composition is, why it is a fallacy. Then we will move ahead with some of the common situations where we can expect to see the fallacy of composition being made in argument or influenced by people. Then we will look at some of the example of this fallacy, thus that fallacy of composition. Then while talking with this, we will also talk about what if this fallacy gets mistaken for. And finally, the last one is how to avoid this fallacy. First of all, to start with this, I would like to give a short meaning of fallacy. Fallacy means a mistaken belief, especially one based on unsound arguments or a failure in reasoning, which renders an argument invalid or faulty reasoning. Now, I would like to ask a simple question to all of you. Have you ever been at a musical concert, sporting event, or a community event and thought to yourself that if we will leave a few minutes early from the event, we can easily beat all the traffics? We might have discovered that everyone else was thinking same things, and they end up with taking a long time to get out of a parking lot. We can only able to beat all the traffic when just a few people are thinking that same way, but not everyone at the end has the same idea. This phenomena has to do with the fallacy of composition arises when an individual assumes something is true of the whole just because it is true of some part of the whole. Fallacy of composition comes under the category of fallacy of grammatical analogy. Now, I will brief you about why it is a fallacy. Some practice can belong to parts of a whole without therefore belonging to the while, that is what is composed of those parts. We have to look at each property to see whether it is the sort of thing that we can say about both. The fallacy of composition occurs where we reason about parts and wholes and their properties and we are not careful. I would like to give a simple example of this fallacy, like the wheel of truck is made up of rubber. Therefore, the truck to which it is a part is also made up of rubber. This is clearly a fallacy because trucks are often made with a variety of parts in which many may not be made up of rubber. This fallacy often confuse us with the fallacy of hasty generalization. Why does this fallacy of composition exist? And why do we think like this? The answer of this tricky question is that we usually reason and draw conclusions from our own situation and our own experiences. It is the simplest way to examine our own situation and then the result, the same actions which would have same action for all. Although it may be true for some circumstances, not always. Many a times it can be a simple reasoning which comes from not having all necessary facts and information. Now, I would like to give one more example of this fallacy. Like if a runner runs faster, she can win the race. Therefore, if all the runners run faster, they all can win the race. In this, the conclusion is false. Athletic competitions are examples of zero-sum games where the winner wins by preventing all other competitions from winning. Often, when something is true for the point, it does also apply to the whole or vice versa. But the major difference is whether there exists good evidence to show that this is the case, because many a times we observe consistencies in these things. Our thinking can become biased so that we pursue consistency to exist where it does not. For example, Manish was a precious child and had a liking for a logic. The reason that he reasoned that the atoms are invisible and that he was also made up of atoms and therefore is also invisible too. Unfortunately, despite of this, he loses his game hide and seek due to wrong fallacy of composition. Not all the arguments of this form are fallacy of composition. Some properties like as being bigger than a bus must be possessed by the whole if possessed by each part. There is one case where there is difficulty to decide whether the fallacy of composition is committed concerns the cosmological argument for existence of God. These arguments takes the consistency of the universe. The simplest way to argue for the consistency of the universe is to argue from consistency of each of its parts as follows. Everyone in this universe is contingent, means could possibly have failed to exist, and therefore the second one is the universe as a whole is consistent. It also means could possibly have failed to exist. We should always make sure that we never find ourselves thinking with a fallacy of composition when we are coming up with an idea. One more example I would like to add with my video. Thus that if we have all the best players in our team, we will always win. Now, note that I am saying always win and that is expecting more from the players than the whole team can deliver. Winning involves much more than having good players. It is not necessary that a team with poor players cannot win. Sometimes they can also beat a team with better players. Having the best players does not equal having the best teams or even the team that can always win. Now, I would like to share some information that how to avoid the fallacy of composition. There are mainly two important aspects help us to see if the fallacy of composition is involved or not. The two types of they are accidentals and essentials. Accidentals are the attributes belonging to some nature but not constituting but part of its essence. In other words, accidents entails that it is attributed to something but it is not necessary to that nature things. For example, a human may have brown hair, green eyes and be a certain height and a certain weight. But these are all accidental to a particular human. Thus that we don't have to change the nature. Hence, they are all accidental. On the other hand, essential refers to belonging or concerning the essence or nature of something. In other words, its essence make it what it is as opposed to something else. It is essential to humans only. For example, it is accidental to triangles that when they are combined together, they make squares. But it is essential to triangles that they are geometric figure and when they are combined together, the whole can only be a larger geometric figure. Thus that it cannot be a non-geometric figure. In fallacy of composition, a characteristics can be transferred from the points to the whole when the existence of that characteristics is in the parts is what will cause it to be have of the whole. It is important to note that the crowning of an inference about the characteristics of a class based on characteristic of its individual member is not always fallacies. In some of the cases, sufficient justifying can be provided to prove that conclusion is true. For example, it is true that an individual rich person has more wealth than an individual poor person. In this case, the evidence used will warrant the inference, and the fallacy of composition will not be committed. The second type of fallacy is fallacy of composition is committed when it is concluded that what is true of the parts of a whole must be true of the whole without there being adequate justification for the claim. One of the real life examples I would like to share with you, which most of us are familiar with that. Thus that classical tricky question is, which is heavier, of a ton of feathers or a ton of lead? Because of this fallacy, the hope is that the person answering will think that because individual feathers are light, a measure weight of them will be lighter than some weight of something normally thought of as heavier. Some more tricky questions go even further and make the feather the right answer by using different measures of weight, like a pound of gold weighs less than a pound of feathers, because gold is measured in troy weight. The fallacy of composition is measured is also important to the study of macroeconomics. It is used in study of macroeconomics. Many intelligent looking folks commit this fallacy when the subject of macroeconomic policy arises. For instance, macroeconomic is not a business, it is not a household, it is not a microeconomics, it is not a family, it is the economy. It has its own set of principles, its own set of theories, and its own set of rules. Treating the macroeconomics like a business or household commonly leads to the fallacy of composition. For example, during economic bad times, thus that recession period, the appropriate action of a profit-minded business is to lay off workers and to reduce the production of commodities. The reasonable action by a household is to reduce spreading and set aside or save some income for future emergency. Both of these actions, if promoted by government policies, would likely turn a modest recession into devastating depreciation. Thus that what is true at microeconomics level is not necessarily true at the macroeconomic level. What is true for the parts is not necessarily true for the whole. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you like it, and please like and comment on my video.